Друзья, всем привет! Сегодня мы поговорим с Энди родом из Австралии. Я с ним познакомился в Пекине 3 года назад. Данная запись была сделана в моей комнате за чашкой чая в непринужденной обстановке.
So let's start. First of all, I'd like to ask you about kangaroos and what do they mean for ordinary Australian people?
Yeah. Honestly, I think like most Australians, obviously in their daily life, they don't mean anything, right? Like if you're in the city, you don't think about kangaroos. But as a symbol, definitely as like a symbol of the country, and the symbol of the country, they have I guess they embody something about. Just because they are uniquely Australian, they mean Australia, I think.
Is it endangered animal?
No, well, there are lots and lots of different species of kangaroo. And so I think a lot of them are not endangered. In fact, there are too many of certain species. So some farmers might even shoot them. But there might be some species of kangaroo that are endangered. But I don't know about that. It's not like in the public. It's not in public discourse.
So, but can you compare it with Chinese pandas and kangaroos in terms of value? It's not that valuable.
No, I think not. Yeah, they're just so common in Australia, in certain parts of Australia. So, it's common if you drive between two cities, you might see a dead kangaroo on the road, right? Because they're common, and people don't really mourn the dead kangaroo because they're that common. Right.
So we have some common things that you know about Australia, like Canberra, Sydney, for example, Melbourne, kangaroos, and etc. Could you share with us some uncommon things that we don't know or not many people know about?
Yeah. So I think people will be pretty surprised to hear that we have too many camels in Australia. Too many wild camels. Yeah.
Never heard of this.
Yeah, so we have more than 1 million wild camels in Australia.
So even more than kangaroos?
No, I assume that we would have more kangaroos, but 1 million wild camels, and the government actually has to cull them because there are too many, and they affect the environment. So like the government sends helicopters and people shooting the camels because we have too many camels. And we sell camels to the Middle East as well because we have too many.
It's really
So like more than 100 years ago, we bought camels from the Middle East to help us, explore and
deserts, right?
And develop around the desert areas. But now we sell camels to the Middle East. That's one thing. Another thing is, we have, although everyone thinks of Australia as like the beautiful beaches and the warm sun and beautiful weather, but I've been told we have the
you have been told.
Yeah.
So you don't know personally.
I don't know. I haven't checked my facts. You have to do the fact checking. I've been told that we have the biggest ski field in the world. So it's the biggest in area. It's not the best, of course. Like there's better snow in other parts of the world. But we have
the fact itself that there's snow in Australia, it's surprising.
Yeah, there's snow and then you can every winter you can go snowing and snowing, skiing, sorry, I'm too tired. We have the biggest area, like the ski field called Thredbo is the biggest ski field in the world.
So the next one is how does it feel to live so far away from the rest of the world?
It's an interesting question. Like, in a way, we're not that far from the rest of the world. For example, Indonesia is right across the ocean from Australia, and Indonesia's population is however 100 million people, right? It's a big country. And then just even further from Indonesia, you're not too far then from like Malaysia and all
well,
that.
still you got my point. What I mean.
Sure. So, but anyway, I wanted to make the point that true. So, I think Australians are definitely they are a little bit like insulated and closed-minded. People make that comment of Americans, right? Australians they can be like that. For example, we don't tend to learn another language. We tend just to know English and no other foreign language, or just to have a really, really, really basic knowledge from school of another language, but really, really, really basic. I think we feel safe because we are isolated. Yeah. We're so, like, because we don't have any other countries bordering us by land. I think we feel really, we do feel on our own, but safe in a sense. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about on our border.
So it's mostly positive.
I think so. Yeah.
Are there any negative sides of being isolated to some extent?
We're definitely isolated as a Western nation, right? Along with along with New Zealand, we're the only Western nation in a, like, every nation that surrounds us is not Western, and I think maybe this has given us feelings of insecurity in the past, but I think we are learning, like in the last 50 years, we've been learning how to be a part of Southeast Asia, or a part of, like, to engage more with the neighboring countries and with Asia, and not to be so focused on Europe and America, which are so far away, right? Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about China, and why did you choose China as your destination?
Yeah. So the first time I left Australia to live overseas, I came to China. That was 5 years ago. But honestly, then I was more interested in just going abroad, like to try another country, to try living in another country and seeing another part of the world, you know.
Was it important for you? It would be in Asia or in South America?
Right.
Or Europe?
I didn't want to go to a country that I thought would be quite similar to Australia. So I didn't want to go to America, didn't want to go to England, and even Europe, maybe I was less keen to go to. So I was more keen to go to Africa, Asia. Honestly, South America was just in Australia, South America is a bit off our mind. So I didn't really think about South America, but Australia, Asia and Africa I thought about. Anyway, but I China had been on my mind because I guess the story of China is, the 20th century story of China is such it looms large in your mind, I guess, when you think of, like, the impressive stories of the 20th century when you think about countries, you know. So that I think impressed me, just the story of China in the 20th century, and also its increasing importance in the world. So I think I was attracted to China because of its modern history and its increasing influence. So I wanted to learn more about a country that I thought was going to play a bigger role in the world in the next 50 years, 100 years, or whatever. So that was definitely one reason why I chose China. And then another reason was its specific relationship with Australia, which was becoming more important as well. But then there's, the personal reasons as well. Like, I had a specific friend who suggested a specific...
So, let's talk about China. What do you like about China and Beijing, and what other people can learn from Chinese?
Yeah. So I think, your answer changes over time because it's a very personal question. So, it's about your specific experience, right? But broadly speaking, I think like China is just like for me, for a foreigner, just is so fascinating. It's fascinating because it's so different. Like, yeah, Chinese culture is just so different from
any other culture.
Well, I guess from Western cultures,
Most
you know,
cases.
like maybe Korea and Japan, it's a bit more similar, right? But for an Australian or for a Westerner, it's just so different. The people are so different. Like just the way Chinese people behave and their values and their assumptions, yeah, just so different. And so it's fascinating. It's just really interesting to see a different culture and a different society. I've tried hard to learn the language, and so that's also like just a really fascinating experience to be able to, because I've never learned a foreign language well before, so even just that experience itself.
This is your first foreign language, Chinese?
Yeah, like in school I learned German, but not like all I could say is like I'm from Australia. Like
your conscious decision to learn foreign languages is Chinese. I would say.
Yeah, you
made a conscious decision to learn foreign language.
Right, and to really want to be up to to bring it to a skill where I can chat fairly comfortably with people, and now my goal is to actually be able to work using Chinese. So anyway, like yeah, that itself is also just a really interesting experience, and the characters, again, it's such a foreign, bizarre thing from an English speaker's perspective to be dealing with characters and reading characters. Like I've started reading books now, and
you mean Chinese characters?
Chinese characters, right? I've started reading books now, and like to think that like this page is just pictures, you know, and it's difficult. It's very difficult because there's no pronunciation clues, or there are, but you know, like it's you don't get as much help when you look at a page of Chinese writing. Like I've studied.
It doesn't help a lot there.
What's that?
It doesn't help a lot.
Yeah, right. Because I've studied Korean, for example, and Korean is phonetic, and so if you can you sound out the word, and if you've learned the word before, that's it right there. But in Chinese, you can't sound out the word. You can't guess if you've never. You can make some simple guesses, but you might be wrong. It's hard. And so I said that I like China because it's fascinating, but I think I also like China because of the challenge as well. Like the challenge of staying engaged in such a foreign culture, and to stay engaged in learning the language, and to keep improving even when it's so foreign and different.
How about Beijing?
Beijing in particular? Honestly, I'm still learning about Beijing, but yeah, I am excited about the importance of it, I guess, like the centralness of Beijing as like the center of China. So it's exciting to be right in the center of this like changing, growing nation, and this nation which is still evolving and like still finding its place as a nation itself. Like just like domestically, it's still finding so much of its like it's still growing domestically, and then also finding its position in the world.
And as for what other countries, nationalities might learn from China?
Yeah, sure. So, I think socially, like, on a kind of more personal or like, personal level. Not
sure. This is why interview more interesting when it's personal.
Yeah, right. Like I think Chinese people, they have like their friendships and their like family relationships, and even like school, like relationships at school between classmates and even classmates and teachers and stuff like that. They're just so much closer, and it's because it's that classic distinction we make between East Asian countries and Western countries, where Westerners are individualistic,
right,
and East Asian people are, right, they're group oriented, and there are problems that come from the group orientation, and there are things that we criticize, and like I think I agree that there are cons that come from it, but there are also real pros that come from like just the closeness of relationship between just two people as friends in China, but also like in a group.
And it goes to Guanxi.
Yeah, Guanxi is different. I don't fully understand that, but I mean, yeah, just that.
This concept of classmates, studying together, at school, at university, and have a connection.
Yeah, that kind of connection. Yeah, and then friends and family move closer. Like more, people have more responsibility from. No, I'll put it a different way. People have a claim on other people's lives in China, and I think that's positive in many ways.
How do you say in another way? How to claim for other people don't understand this?
People have a claim on other people's lives. So, for example, like an Australian mother, she feels like she can't push or can't like her own child's life is very separate from her own. So an Australian mother, she can't really
force.
Yeah, but force is a negative way of putting it. But like a Chinese
interfere.
Yeah, but again, this is a negative word. But I think there's a positive aspect to it, where like a Chinese son, his life is not just his life. His life is also belongs to his mother, but in the other way as well. Like his mother, her life also belongs to her son. And so this is the case between friends in China and then even I think like even with classmates and stuff like that. The fact that you belong to other people is like, from a Westerner's perspective, sometimes it's stifling, right? You feel like you might be suffocating, or they ask too much of you. It's not their right. But I think in other ways it can be quite beautiful.
So I know you're a member of international orchestra here in Beijing.
Yeah.
Could you tell us something about this?
Yeah. So I studied music as my major, and then I worked for a few years as a professional musician and a music teacher.
You mean back home, right?
Yeah, back home in Australia. But I also worked for a Chinese orchestra we did a 1-month tour of Europe. When Volvo was bought by a Chinese company.
So when was it?
The tour was in 2011, and I think Geely, the Chinese company Geely, they bought Volvo in maybe 2009 or something.
So they organized a tour.
Yeah, to give like a positive face to China and to the company in Europe. Yeah. So anyway, I've worked as a musician and
so you were a member of this part.
Yeah.
Chinese orchestra, right?
Just for the tour, just for the month tour.
You were the only foreigner, or they were?
I was the only foreigner.
Foreigner. Yeah. So this Chinese orchestra, right? Completely Chinese.
Yeah.
Except for you.
Yeah. So we were like, we would go around Europe in this bus, and it was like being part of a Chinese tourist group, because we would also go to tourist sites as well, and we would go to Chinese restaurants all across Europe. We hardly ate any local food in Europe, just Chinese restaurants. Anyway, so this time when I came to Beijing, I decided that I wanted to be involved in the music scene here, partly as a way just to meet people, but also to keep my skills going not as a professional, but like just to keep a higher standard of playing. I play the French horn.
French, right?
French horn.
Is it different from original, like ordinary horn?
No, so horn. When you say horn, it's the French.
Okay,
that's just what we call it in English. Yeah. So I decided I wanted to keep playing, and maybe also have also like to have the opportunity to do some fun performances, maybe to tour in China or even internationally with a Chinese orchestra or something like that. Again, I thought that would be exciting. Anyway, so I found this orchestra here in Beijing. Actually, I have an Australian friend who plays in it, and she told me about it, and then so through her, I joined the orchestra. Yeah.
How often do you play now?
The orchestra rehearses 4 concerts. Like, some orchestras will just rehearse every week, no matter what. But this orchestra rehearses rehearses when it has concerts, but it rehearses, maybe 8 times before a concert. It's just an amateur orchestra. So they have, for example, they have a concert coming up in maybe 2 months it's going to be like Disney movie music and stuff like that.
So 2 months from now, right?
Yeah, and they're starting rehearsing in 2 weeks. And so, yeah, there'll be a rehearsal every week, and then before the concert, there'll be maybe 3 rehearsals that week.
Yeah, Disney. The one recent was in Taiwan.
In
Taiwan. Taipei, Taiwan.
What?
Disney concert.
Oh, right. Yeah,
This friend of mine is playing there. She's a singer. So that's why I know her.
Yeah. But this is an independent thing. It's just, they're just playing some Disney music that they like. Yeah. But the conductor is Russian as well.
Let's talk about marriage stuff. That was a lot of girls in our countries. What Australians think of marriage and how important it is for your people.
Yeah. So I guess like a lot of Western nations, and even just like nations as they become more developed, right? They have a tendency to, like, the marriage rate goes down. People marry later, and Australia's the same. So people are marrying later, people are not marrying, people are just living together, and that kind of thing. But Australians still, obviously, they do get married. It's still an important issue. Same-sex marriage is an issue. Like at the moment, it's not legal anywhere in Australia, I think, but it's quite important. It's a big part of, like, it's often on the news, the political discussion around same-sex marriage. And I think the fact that same-sex marriage is an issue in our country means that marriage itself is still an issue, right? Like people still marry. People still think marriage is an important thing. So yeah, there's that. Honestly, I think, like, just in my personal opinion, I think that the fact that marriage has become less important, and people are more likely to live with someone for a few years and then maybe break up and then find another partner, that kind of thing. I think it means Australians are a bit, like, I think it probably leads to a feeling of being a bit lost and maybe loneliness sometimes, because relationships are not so good, really. Yeah. Though of course you can be married to someone and have a not so good relationship, but even if the institution of marriage is stronger, I don't know, I wonder if really in the end people end up having, they're less lonely and they maybe have less destructive relationships. I wonder. This is my personal, something I wonder about personally.
And that person asked me to ask you about marrying a Chinese girl, or not necessarily Chinese girl, but just any other foreigner, right?
From an Australian's perspective.
Like from Australian perspective, from your own perspective.
My own perspective, yeah, sure. I think
would you ever marry a foreigner?
Right, yeah. So from an Australian's perspective, I think, like, marriage between people from other countries is quite common. I think there's no kind of social barrier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From your own perspective?
And from my own perspective, yeah, I would definitely do it. Like, I have a Chinese girlfriend now, but honestly, like, in the past, I have thought about just the really simple logistical problems of marrying someone from another culture. The fact that their family's in another country, like, and just the
logistics, yeah.
Yeah, just that kind of, like,
sure, of course.
Because logistics, it sounds like such a cold thing to worry about, but it affects your life, right? Like,
sure.
It means that if you live in one of the person's country, it means that person can always see their family, but the other person can't always see their family, and there's this kind of imbalance. And also, there are difficulties that come from cultural differences, not being able to understand each other in certain ways. But then people said there's also, beauty that comes from, like, I don't know, the interplay of people coming from a different background or something like that.
So what basically you personally and Australians know about Kazakhstan?
Yeah. And
would you like to visit probably one day my country?
Yeah, well, I would definitely love to visit if I could. Sure, definitely. So I think Australians know almost
After North Korea, you can't be afraid of anything.
Well, I'm definitely not afraid of Kazakhstan.
You don't have to.
So Australians, in general, they would know almost nothing about Kazakhstan. They, because it's a stan, they would assume it's like in the Middle East, right?
But it's in Central Asia.
Right. But yeah, I think a lot of Australians would just say kind of like it's in the Middle East. Yeah. I also know almost nothing about Kazakhstan. I think you're probably like the third Kazakhstani I've ever met. Or
Throughout your life.
that. Yeah, I think in Australia I've never met a Kazakhstani person. First Kazakhstani person I ever met was, you said Kazakhstani, right?
No, Kazakhstani. Yeah, Kazakhstani would be correct.
So the first person I ever met from Kazakhstan was in a Korean language class in Seoul, in South Korea. I had
Student.
I had Kazakhstani classmate. She was really nice. And
male or female?
Girl. Yeah. And but actually, the most exposure I've ever had to Kazakhstan was in Korea.
Okay.
And there was but it was because I watched CNN. It was an Asian CNN, but it was in English. It was still American, but it was CNN with an Asian focus. And there were a lot of ads for Kazakhstan. Yeah, so I used to watch a lot of ads about like investing in Kazakhstan and like the potential of Kazakhstan. So that was like my first real exposure. Was I watched quite a few ads for Kazakhstan on CNN, CNN Asia. But I somehow I know a bit about Kazakhstan. I was aware that it's like a safe place that's had quite a stable history. So like I had a positive view of Kazakhstan as it's a stable place, and then just this and aware of its natural beauty. Maybe actually through those ads, through the ads, I maybe became more aware of its natural beauty. And then like I have a generally positive impression of Kazakhstan, and I would make the assumption that Kazakhstani people would be very hospitable and like very friendly and easy to talk to. It would be my assumption.
So a lot of people are interested in traveling, but many of them are afraid of traveling, especially hitchhiking and couchsurfing.
Yeah.
Could you share with us your personal experience traveling in Southeastern Asia? Yeah.
So my experience was like basically it was in almost entirely positive, and I enjoyed the experience. And you can
mention some countries you visited.
Yeah, so I didn't hitchhike in Laos, but I went to Laos and I couch surfed in Laos with an American guy, and also just met a Lao guy through couch surfing as well. It's just like when you couch surf, you can really spend time with someone, even if it's a foreigner, but someone who has some kind of better insight into the country or into the city.
Right?
What's that?
Inside track.
Yeah. That if you're just traveling, if you're just living in a hostel or a hotel, it's just really hard to meet people and have a chat with people and have a good chat with people, with locals or with expats, And so by couch surfing, you really get some kind of insight, and even living in a local person's home, you get a really special insight into the culture and into the country. Even though it's still small, short, and superficial, really, compared to living there, it's still something special, I think. So I started in Laos, and then I hitchhiked through Thailand to Myanmar. In Thailand, I just stayed in hotels because I never knew where I was going to end up. Like each night, I didn't know where I was going to actually get to. And in Myanmar, I also stayed in a hotel because it was illegal to stay with anyone privately, to stay with a local or an expat. Right, illegal for a foreigner to stay with a local or an expat. At the time I was there, that was in 2013. It may have already changed because the country was opening quite quickly. Yeah, and so hitchhiking across Thailand and across Myanmar. You know, the most, and I hitchhiked in China as well. The most like one of the most obvious, or like, I don't know how to say this, the most special thing, I guess, about hitchhiking, or the most wonderful thing is the generosity of the people who take you. You know, like, you don't, especially a foreigner. You know, like you might be nervous to have a foreigner in your car because you're worried about communication, or like, who is this person? Even a local, you know, an Australian is not likely to pick up just a hitchhiker, you know, because they're nervous or afraid, or they just would rather listen to music in their own car and not have to deal with someone they don't know. And so to have people pick you up is just such a lovely thing for them to have done.
What would you recommend for those who haven't tried this?
So, I think it is a good experience for a few different reasons. So one reason is it is a challenge. Like, in many ways, it's harder than just taking the train. You know, right? In some ways, it actually is easier, of course. Like, even like logistically, in some ways, it's easier because you just walk outside onto the road and put your hand out. You know, you don't have to wait for the train. You don't have to buy the ticket. You don't have to go to the train station and then when you arrive at your destination, get out of the train station to the place where you need to go. Like, in some ways it's easier, but in many ways it's harder, and it's emotionally more difficult because you are having to like deal with communicating in a foreign environment. It's difficult because maybe like in one day you maybe have to have difficult conversations with 10 people in 10 different cars, and it's difficult because because you are kind of imposing yourself in a way, I guess. Like, they of course they're choosing to have you in their car, but you're also, you don't really belong in their car so yeah, it's difficult like that. And so the fact that it's difficult, then it's a really interesting challenge. You know, like, I set myself that challenge of traveling all across China, you know, from to certain place, like 2,000 kilometers or more. And the same thing, I set myself the challenge from Laos to Myanmar, to the capital of Myanmar, and like, to just succeed in doing that, in overcoming the different obstacles, is exciting. But then, yeah, it's an exciting way to meet people, to chat with people, have an adventure.
Can you recall any unusual, weird, strange stories?
Yeah, there are a few different strange or unusual ones. I'll tell you a really beautiful experience I had first. I was in Thailand, and I think it was getting on evening, and of course, like, hitchhiking in the evening is maybe not as safe. People can't see you so easily, and the roads are maybe more dangerous. But I think the most important thing is just people can't see you, and then people are less likely to stop. So you don't really want to be hitchhiking in the evening. But I guess I wanted to get to a certain point. I had that goal, and I think maybe, like, I also, it was coming on evening, and I wasn't really close to a good place to stay. So I thought, I have to keep going. Like, I have to push through, and I have to try to get to the next big city so I can find somewhere to stay. And anyway, I think I can't remember where this guy picked me up, but I think I was just on a pretty empty road, not much nearby, and a guy picks me up, but he was transporting mattresses, and so I sat on like a big pile of mattresses on the back of his like little truck, and but it was open, so like I just sat on the top of all these mattresses, going through a beautiful forest in the middle of Thailand and mountains, and so it was so comfortable lying on the mattresses, and then
upstairs, right?
Yeah, right up the top. Yeah, and like just holding onto the bars of the truck with my hands, and then just
like
looking. Yeah, and then just looking at the beautiful, like the mountains and temples in the distance and stuff like that was really cool. Another weird experience I had in Thailand was I was getting right close to the border of Thailand and Myanmar, and I actually had some contacts in the city I was going to, and I wanted to go and meet them at a certain time. So I was kind of wanting to go quickly that day. Like I wanted to get to this city by like 10 a.m. in the morning, and so I got up at like 6 o'clock to try to get there in time. And this man picks me up, and he had a bit of English and he could communicate a bit, but it was difficult, but he could communicate with me. And he was some kind of like researcher or university professor or something like that. And he said he could take me, in the right direction. But then suddenly in the car, he told me he wanted to show me his research. And so he turned off the highway, and we started going through these through these fields, and like we were on really small roads, and we were getting further and further off the highway. And I was thinking, I want to get to meet these contacts, and I want to like get to the city. And he kept on saying like, oh no, don't worry, like it's just a short detour, but it kept on lasting longer and longer, and I didn't really understand what kind of research he was doing or what exactly he wanted to show me, and then in the end we ended up on on a different main road, not quite a highway but another main road, and anyway, like I don't think he even really showed me anything. And he just dropped me off on this other main road, and anyway, but then after that, like an Australian guy happened to a guy wound down the window, and he said, "Hey mate, where are you going?" And it was an Australian guy.
He was in the car, right?
He was not driving. There was a Thai guy driving, but he was a passenger in the car, and he was his own kind of private hired car, and so he ended up showing me this really ancient city that they were going to explore, and then taking me on my way towards the city where I was actually trying to get to. But yeah, it was a funny experience, because you get that experience a lot hitchhiking.